This was literally me 6 years ago, blasting out cold emails, desperately trying to find my first client. But it's fair to say we learned a lot of lessons along the way, and a lot of these the hard way. So in this video today, I'm going to be showing you behind the scenes of our agency and how we now generate over 100 leads per month organically. I'm going to be pulling back the curtain and showing you every step from how we attract new customers to our entire sales process to how we actually close and win new clients, and how we started all of this even with zero budget. In fact, I'm pretty sure when I was freelancing back in the day, I probably had negative zero in my bank account. So whether you're selling B2B or B2C right now, there will be invaluable lessons that you can learn from this video to apply to your marketing to amplify the results that you are getting. So let's get straight into it. Okay, guys, so here we go. I'm going to be breaking this down into really three core elements. So firstly, the first element we'll be looking at is our demand generation engine. So how do we get some brand awareness? How do we drive awareness for the brand, generate demand, and then bring leads into our world? I'll then be showing you into our lead nurture systems that we have to nurture these leads over time and bring them into our sales pipeline. And then finally, I'll be walking through the process we go through from closing new sales opportunities and turning them into customers. So I've broken our demand generation engine down into three main phases. So when we started the business, as I mentioned, we had pretty much zero budget. So we really had to do things in the most basic way possible. And for me, that meant reaching out to businesses, cold calling, cold emailing, and I would be faced with rejection after rejection. So one of the things that I learned here the hard way is that nobody wants to be sold to, but people do want to buy. And this is one of the most pivotal and critical lessons you can learn in marketing, to understand that if you can break people out of the patterns that they are in day to day, that is half the battle. What I eventually realized, and eventually becoming more of a business owner where we're getting more businesses coming to us, is that business owners, founders, CMOs, marketing directors, they are bombarded with so many emails each day. So really, you have to find a way to cut through the noise. So one of the first things we found that worked really well is using hyper personalization in our emails. There was a bunch of different tools I was experimenting with at the time. One of them that I loved was Lemlist, which is a outbound email platform, which allowed us to put in merge tags into the email, which looked like handwritten notes. So this could actually be sent out at scale by putting someone's name in, but it would actually add that in a way that looks like it's a genuine handwritten note. It could also do all sorts of things like augmenting the front page of somebody's website onto your laptop, again, at scale. So it would actually look like I was on their websites. These kind of approaches would cut through the noise and really help me to stand out in inboxes that are otherwise just cluttered with the same old message. You probably have about a second, if that, to which someone's going to skim that email and decide this is spam and delete it. So if you can find ways to cut through the noise, it's going to work so much better for you. And this was one of the biggest lessons that I learned, is that even though it might take more time to do, the benefits far outweigh the cost here. So what I would actually do is find businesses who I just thought I would love to work with. So businesses that I'd seen on TV, businesses that I was seeing in my LinkedIn feed, and I would actually take the time to do the research on them. And because these were businesses I was genuinely passionate about, I didn't have to fake it. I was genuinely excited about their business, and I had all these ideas that I thought might help them. So what I would do is actually reach out to them and say, hey, love what you guys are doing. I would send a completely personalized message. And you'd see for a lot of these, here's an example here from one of our early clients, Molly at Flexer. She came back to me at the time and said, hey, look, we've just started working with an agency, but thanks for your kind words. This was the response I'd get a lot of the time. But because this wasn't just a numbers game for me at this point, I went back to Molly and I said, hey, look, I'd love to do your video and just share these ideas with you anyway. I sent it over to her, and she then came back about a week later saying this: had a question. I've obviously blocked out any sensitive information here, but had a question. Your LinkedIn tactics are obviously working as I thought of you first. This just goes to show that when you take the time to do this approach, when you take the time to actually find businesses who you want to engage with, businesses that you can be passionate about, excited about, and take the time to do that research and show that you actually care and that it's not just a numbers game, people remember that. Now, the problem we ended up having here and why I had to shift away from this is because as we started growing and getting more and more clients, I then had less and less time to actually do that research and do the outbound in the first place. So this is when we then realized we needed to start creating an inbound marketing system as opposed to relying on outbound. So one of the first things we tried doing here was to running our own paid search campaigns. But one of the things we found that as a very, very small business with little to no budget, we only probably had at the time a couple £100 a month to spend on marketing because of some of the players we were up against in this place and the kind of cost per click for the keywords we wanted to bid on. It just wasn't a sustainable strategy for us. We didn't have the case study and the credibility of some of the big players. We were getting outbid every time on keywords, so we were showing lower in those paid search positions. So it really just wasn't a sustainable strategy. So it was at this stage I realized that I'd have to take a smarter approach to doing this and start leveraging more organic channels. So one of the things I did here was I started to find forums, groups, existing communities, subreddits that I could engage with and just give value. One of the biggest things that I found here, particularly on Reddit, and I've actually done another video about this recently that I'll link in the description of this video, but trying to drive people through to your website or promote your services isn't going to work. So I had to apply the same methodology, the same thinking as with the outbound strategy, and giving without any expectation, giving because I wanted to give. When I changed that, everything changed in terms of the responses we were getting. I was actually getting people reaching out to me even though I hadn't asked them to. And this was the baffling thing. And it comes back to that original principle that I mentioned. People do not want to be sold to, but they do want to buy. If you allow people to come to their own decision and for people to truly think, this was a really useful post, this was a really insightful answer, I want to reach out for them. When you give someone a call to action at the end of a post, it no longer feels authentic. It no longer feels like you were genuinely trying to give value. It feels like an exchange. And in communities, especially communities like Reddit, people hate that. It's a platform about giving. So when you show up, you have to give without expectation of getting anything back. And this is such a hard thing to wrap your head around. I struggled with this for months, but when this finally clicked for me, when I could truly start giving, just excitedly, just wanting to help people without any expectation, I started getting so many messages back. From there, we then started to repurpose a lot of the content I was making into blog articles on the website, into long form YouTube videos. Now, these videos and these blog articles were a real turning point for us because this started driving traffic to our website through YouTube, as did the content I was posting in communities and forums. People were naturally going through to my profile, finding out who we were, coming through to the website. The blog was assisting that as well. So over time, this started boosting our domain's authority, which helped us to rank higher in search engines. So not only were we getting traffic and leads now trickling in from these sources, but we then started getting our commercial pages ranking. So for example, we rank position 1 organically for a lot of keywords around online course marketing agency. You'll see here we're in the first position organically. These are all sponsored listings. And this was one of the other fascinating things that I found, is that actually the conversion rate on organic listings versus paid listings, even though these appeared higher, and when we'd bid on these terms before, the conversions were much, much higher with an organic listing. And I think the reason for this is because a lot of the time, people do actually know a sponsored listing when they see one. and they know an organic listing when they see one. And often when we get leads coming through from companies, they will say, oh, you guys had good organic ranking, so I knew I could trust you. There's almost an element of, I believe, trust that some people have with organic listings because it feels more secure. Whereas a lot of people are aware of anyone can just stick an ad up. So there's instantly an element of skepticism there about whether or not they can trust your business. The other thing I realized here as well was that by only targeting bottom of funnel, by only going after commercial search without thinking about these more top of funnel searches through a content strategy, is it's very easy to be commoditized. Whereas if you build that trust through content prior to people making that commercial search, you become seen as the preferred options. A lot of the time when people inquire with us today, they're not even speaking to other agencies, or if they do speak to other agencies, they do it just out of due diligence. But 9 times out of 10, they're already 90% decided on us because they've been following us. We've been the one to help them to come to this decision, to realize they needed help, to see the path ahead, to give them that clarity. And this is the same in any business. Again, whether you're in B2B or B2C, if you can be the one to build up that loyalty, to educate your customers, to entertain your customers, to build that relationship, when the time comes when they're in the need for your product or service or whatever you're selling, they are infinitely more likely to buy from you. So you no longer run the risk of being commoditized. If you're in the e-com space, you see this with Amazon all the time when brands are generating demand for a certain category of product and people will then go and buy it on Amazon because they have no affinity with the brand. So the same thing in the B2B space, where if people haven't been able to find an answer or haven't had a brand that to them to come to the decision or help to educate them on the space they're in, they then just treat all the companies like commodities. It becomes a bidding war alone, and you get bartered down on price. You end up with very long buying cycles or very low close rates. But again, when you've built this trust through content, that completely changes. We saw our sales cycles coming down, our close rates were increasing. And the crazy thing is, when we were getting leads, people were actually excited to speak to me. They'd seen the content, they'd read the content, they'd experienced so much value from it, and they were genuinely grateful. So it completely changed the dynamic of the calls and the leads that we were getting in. Now, another lesson that I realized here, particularly with our inbound marketing, was that YouTube, out of all of the channels, had a significantly higher close rate when we actually analyzed the data in HubSpot. The main thing that I can pin that down to is that the longer the form of consumption, the higher the level of trust that is built. So if you think about all these platforms like TikTok, Instagram Reels, and businesses doing posts on there every day, to build the equivalent trust of a long form YouTube video, you might have to put out 10, 20, maybe even 100 pieces of content for someone to feel the same level of affinity and trust with your brand. And the other great thing I realized about YouTube is the second biggest search engine in the world. So it works very similar to other search engines out there like Google, in that if you get a particular video and you can get that ranking in YouTube search, it will bring you traffic in perpetuity. This is a video that you can see I created this 2 years ago. It's had around 85,000 views to date. It brings us leads into the business every single week consistently. And this isn't to say that the other channels don't matter, but this is just an observation I had, and the channel you'll want to use for your business is going to be completely different. This is really going to depend on where your target audience are hanging out the most. How do they prefer to consume certain types of content? Even with us in the marketing space, there are some pieces of content that will generally do better through blog because people prefer to consume a written piece of content on a particular topic. There are other topics that people would rather watch on video. So this is really going to vary. The other thing I found with our content marketing strategy is the intent and the context is absolutely critical. For example, I had some videos that tons of views and tons of subscribers, and I thought, oh my God, this is it. We're going to make millions off of this. And we got absolutely zero sales from that video. I then had other videos which had far less views and far less subscribers or even likes, but they kept bringing us leads over and over. And this is when I realized view count, likes, subscribers, comments, those vanity metrics people often track, actually in the grand scheme of things mean very little. Now, that's not to say you can't get videos with high view count that also generate leads, because this one is an example. But sometimes you might see videos that have very few views, but just bring you so many leads and sales. And this is where context comes into it. So a really good example of this is there was a video I did, probably had nearly 100,000 views now, I think, about how to find a certain tracking script in your Google Analytics. So many comments, so many likes, so many subscribers, but no leads from it at all from what we can see so far. We've then had another video about increasing your website conversion rate, which has probably generated us over, I'd say, about 40 leads to date. And that video has only had several thousand views on it. And again, this is where the intent and the context comes in. If this is something that somebody is likely to be searching for when they're in a great deal of pain, or it indicates they're coming close to a buying decision, that's more likely to convert higher. But there are so many different nuances and variables in play. So you really need to experiment with this, but always factor that into the equation when you're planning a content strategy. I didn't necessarily know this when I created this video, but one of the things we later found is that by calling it digital marketing KPIs, what we were actually getting is that there was a lot of new heads of marketing, marketing directors, CMOs who had just started a new position. They're restructuring the team and they're looking to set fresh new KPIs to impress the company, right? So they can shake things up, they can get results. So they were watching this video and saying, oh my God, this is awesome. We need an agency to support us with this. And they were then coming to us off the back of that. And they were seeing us as an expert. They were seeing us as credible authorities in this space. And this is how sometimes you don't know the context. You don't know how that video is going to be perceived until you put it out there. But you will start seeing in your industry, you will start seeing these trends and nuances over time of what works well and what doesn't, what's more top of funnel, and then what has a slightly higher chance of converting. But then this brings me on to the next point, which is really important, because even though you'll have a lot of people where maybe it is more top of funnel content, maybe they aren't going to convert straight away, it's always worth having a way that people can opt in to receive information from you. Now, to begin with, we used to offer a lot of gated content, like these traditional squeeze pages you see, like, hey, get our top 10 secrets of X, Y, and Z. Squeeze pages used to work really, really well back in the day. It's how businesses generated leads a lot of the time. However, I've seen these performing worse and worse over the years because consumers are getting more and more skeptical. They're fed up of being sent crap in their emails every day. So it's getting harder and harder to get people to opt in. So one of the big shifts we made is, instead of hiding content behind a lead magnet or gating that content, we would make all the content publicly available, but we just give people resources that are almost seen as content upgrades. So once people have read the content, they've got value, they can download a checklist or a swipe file. It's more something kind of practical, easy for them to make their lives easier, as opposed to actually hiding content behind it. The key here is you want to make your content so good that people actually want to receive your email, as opposed to you trying to force them to give you their email to receive the content. This is one of the biggest shifts in mindset that I had to make, and it had phenomenal results, and it will impact everything from your later sales conversions to your open rates, because people actually want to hear from you now because they know you can produce great content. Whereas if you hide your content and you make it gated, people have no idea. So they will sign up with spam email addresses, they'll download the content, and they'll normally instantly unsubscribe or just never open your emails. So really think about how you do this, but having some way that people can choose to continue to hear from you is really, really important. which then comes into the lead nurture flows. But before I get into lead nurture, we need to talk about analytics and optimization. This is going to be a critical part of you growing these channels over time. So this will go from everything from if you're doing outbound right now, so analyzing your open rates, analyzing your click rates, seeing what's getting better results, testing and experimenting with them over time, analyzing posts in forums or platforms that you're posting on. YouTube Studio has some phenomenal features for video where you can literally see the viewer retention rate over time to really start analyzing trends of like, what is grabbing people's attention? It will actually show you when you see these like dips and spikes. When you see a spike here, this often means people have rewound the video back to a certain section. So you can really start to get an understanding of like, wow, what are the like most important elements to people, or what are the elements that are boring people? And you can then use this data to optimize your content over time to make sure you're continuously getting better at it. It's scary the amount of businesses I see who put out a couple of videos on YouTube and then they don't get any views and then they give up and say it wasn't working for them. I've put out over 100 videos on YouTube now. If you look back in our YouTube channel, and I would encourage you to do this when the video's finished, look at some of our old videos. We probably got 10 views on some of them. The quality was terrible. They were boring. The camera was all over the place. The sound was horrible. There are so many things that I've learned along the way that you'll probably be able to see just through looking through some of my old videos. The other thing I learned here from an analytics perspective is that it's much more important to look at the qualitative metrics over quantitative. So your quantitative is going to be your numbers, right? Your likes, your views, and things like that. Qualitative metrics are more who's viewing, how long are they viewing for? Or, for example, are you getting leads? Are you getting the right leads? What kind of leads? This is especially going to be the case when you're dealing with a low volume of metrics, because when you're dealing with small numbers, you're just not going to have enough data to make any reliable decisions off of those quantitative metrics. When I really started diving into the metrics like the view rate and the retention rate on our website, this was fascinating for me. And this in itself was a huge unlock just to starting my obsession with human behavior, which I'd always had a little bit, but like, why do people do the things they do? Also, I genuinely believe this. I think it's a very underrated trait of marketers, but developing your own self-awareness is essential for becoming a good marketer. Because if you see a certain ad that grabs your attention, if you receive an email that makes you laugh or it makes you respond, maybe it makes you feel angry, tuning into that feeling and asking yourself, what is it about that that's making me feel this way? Really becoming aware of your own emotions, your own responses to different things in the outside world, you will learn so much about how to break people out of the patterns they have. So now to come on to our lead nurture campaigns. Now there will, of course, be some people who are ready to buy. They're going to come straight through into our buying process, which I'll come on to shortly. But the vast majority of people you're generating demand from aren't going to be ready to buy just yet. So this is a really critical part. If you think of a marketing funnel, the top of funnel is the widest part of that funnel, right? And that doesn't mean that those people at the top are never going to buy, but that's where you want to be putting attention, because this is what's going to set you up for long-term success, meaning that if you can nurture these leads over time, you're going to end up with a stream of leads that just continue to come in, and you don't then end up with these periods of drought where things dry up, because you have this stream of buyers who are coming down the funnel. So one of the best investments for us in the recent years was investing in a tool like HubSpot and marketing automation platforms to allow us to get additional data on our leads, to find out what pages were they viewing on the website, to really understand the buyer journey, to be able to tag contacts based on what particular lead magnets they had downloaded. So when we were sending them emails, we can send them content that's actually going to be relevant to them, which is going to help to improve your click-through rates. It's going to help to improve your open rates. It's going to help you to develop a better relationship and more trust with your customers. We would then send out lead nurture campaigns, sending people just valuable content. Again, this wasn't just trying to sell them. This was building value. It was developing trust without any expectations. One of the biggest lessons that we learned here was that short and snappy emails over long form, 9 times out of 10, were going to work better. You always just have to ask yourself, again, coming back to that self-awareness piece, would I open this email? Would I read this email if I was busy? Because you have to bear in mind, most people these days are busy. When they're opening your emails, they've got 1,000,001 other things going on. Really be honest with yourself here. If you were busy, if you were stressed, if you'd had a bad day, would you actually take the time to read through this email? One of the things I tried doing here is experimenting with different sender names. So for example, instead of just sending it out as Elevate Digital like we used to do, I would send it out from Tom, or Tom at Elevate, or Tom Payton, and they would generally get much higher open rates because it feels like a more personal email as opposed to a generic marketing email that's come out from a business. It was the same thing I saw with HTML emails. Whilst they might have a time and place and they might have some good use cases, we see this with our own emails. We see it with clients' emails. When you send plain text emails, these tend to get much better responses because it feels personal. It feels like somebody's actually taken the time to send you a real email instead of it being just another marketing email, which people will just open up. They'll see all the graphics and all the images. They'll know it's marketing and they'll say, oh, I'll read it later, or just chuck it straight in spam. The next thing we started doing in our lead nurture flows is actually inviting people to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'd start inviting people to connect with me on LinkedIn. So what this then allowed us to do is to syndicate our content far and wide and to make sure that people were exposed to us regularly. And this is a really important lesson here. Do not underestimate the importance of multi-touch and multi-channel marketing to building trust. This is so powerful. Our self-attribution and CRM attribution reports in HubSpot, doing interviews with our customers, has proved this time and time again. People would see and consume so much content before making that decision to reach out. And when they were seeing me in different places, different formats, they're seeing me on LinkedIn, they're then seeing on YouTube, they're then receiving emails, they're then coming to our blog through Google. The perceived authority, the perceived credibility, the perceived trust, people feel like, and I've had like clients and prospects saying this to me as well, they feel like they know us, they feel like they know our team, they feel like they know me by the time they come to us because they're seeing all these different forms of content in all different places. And again, the forms of content are important as well. So not just being multi-channel, but also mixing up the environment, mixing up the type of content, going from written to video to audio, giving people different ways to consume can really make such a profound difference to the feelings of trust that they have with your brand. We would then also implement retargeting campaigns here. So we could use specific campaigns for people who had been through to certain blogs on our website, so we knew particular problems that they were struggling with, and we can then run specific messages to them with a specific call to action. The great thing about these as well, and the great thing about retargeting ads, is these can be easily scaled up or down to control lead flow. So if you're on a business, so for us, for example, we like to be very careful about the amount of clients we work with, because it's really important to us to be able to deliver a fantastic service to all of our clients. So we need to make sure that we're able to hire the right people internally to make sure we can deliver that service. So we're not focused on growth at all costs. We can actually control the rate of our growth and choose how many clients we take on and who we take on, so we're able to deliver the best service possible. And again, having this lead nurture process is going to allow you to create that consistent stream so that you can be choosy over who you work with, how many clients you take on, and the rate at which you grow the business. I'm also going to link to another video below this that goes into how to repurpose your content and how to create a content system in your business very easily with minimal effort so that you can start distributing content and you can take care of this whole piece without having to spend hours and hours making all of this content manually or sending out all of these emails manually. So now let's come on to the good stuff, right? Now that we've started to nurture these leads and we've got some people now coming in here, so we've set this up, we've set up some automations, we've set up these systems so we can bring people into our world. So what about the people who are ready to buy? Right. Well, what we realized is that even here, there are going to be different stages. So let's say we've got someone who is serious about buying. Some people might come straight through to book a call with us, but we found there were other people who were still serious, but they were just skeptical because maybe they'd been burned in the past. Maybe they'd had other agencies who they dealt with, who maybe let them down. So one of the things we started doing here was to offer a free website and marketing review, because one of the things I realized early on is that we had to find a way to show people that we were experts instead of simply telling. So we started offering these website reviews, which completely changed the dynamic of then the call bookings we were getting, because people received then a huge piece of value from us that really helped to position us as an expert. So they would actually show up excited to talk. This had a similar impact to just leading with content, where it completely changes the dynamic of that call because people were so blown away. You'll see a review here of one of our reviews. I'm still shocked that I received a 30-minute detailed review. What Rich gave me was clear, to the point, real life guidance on exactly how to grow your business. I've already shared this with 3 people today. And this again comes down to that mindset and that approach of giving without expectation. We don't hold anything back in this review, and we're constantly getting people saying to us, how the hell is this free? Because this is where I realized we had to earn people's trust. It's not just going to be given. But we then realized there were some people who were in a position where they wanted to get a faster turnaround. They wanted to have their analytics looked at, which naturally is going to take much more time. So we then started offering a very, very low cost upsell for people to do a premium audit for people, where they receive their website review in just 2 days. We will dive into their website analytics and find exactly where the conversion bottlenecks are, so we can really go based on the data. So having something like this will then allow you to absorb some of that initial customer acquisition cost, especially if you're relying on any form of paid advertising. So these requests would then come into us, and naturally with the amount of submissions we get, we can't help everyone. So we have to vet these based on, what stage of business is this at? Are they even looking to invest in their marketing at this stage? So what happens is we then get a request come through in our Slack channel. So our team will get notified on this. We can then review the applications, and we will then carry out a review, look over their website, look at some of their key competitors, and give them some very practical ways in which they can increase their traffic, leads, and sales for their business. We then send them over a video like this. There's then a calendar booking form underneath this, so people can then book onto a call to discuss this more. But again, there was no obligations here. The video is really designed to give as much value as possible. We don't hold anything back, and we just say, if you want to discuss this in any more detail and you want to explore how we can support you with these things, then you can book a call. Another fascinating thing that we realized with the review on this page, because this was such a critical page for us to generate high intent leads, we would test lots of different forms on here. And this was really, really fascinating to me, because we experimented with some very, very low friction forms. We experimented with how we were asking questions, what questions we were asking, the design of the page, having fancy landing pages versus more simple ones. But then to my surprise, one of the things that had the biggest impact on not only conversion rate, but also lead quality, was actually shifting over to a longer form type form. So this is a multi-step form. We have about 13 questions on this form now. So it's technically like an application form for people to fill out. We get higher conversion rates on this, and we get better lead quality and higher close rates on the back end. And I think the reason for this is because it actually increases the perceived value, because we're not making it easy. So it doesn't feel like such a spammy lead grab style approach. And again, this is just a lesson on the nuance of marketing. Sometimes I think businesses get blinded by optimizing for one specific KPI, i.e., let's just bring our conversion rate up as high as possible, or let's bring our cost per lead down as much as possible, not realizing that there are going to be other effects on the back end of your business. So this just comes back to where analyzing the data and analyzing the data holistically is going to be really, really important to making sure that you understand the tangible impact that it's having on every area of your sales process. This is where we then come onto the call booking. So whether people have come through the review process first or they've come in directly to this page, there's a few things we noticed on here. Adding a video onto this page had a major impact in overall leads, but also lead quality. And here's a really interesting thing that we found. Statistically, very few visitors would actually watch the videos, but the buyers, when we looked in the CRM at who was actually buying, they nearly always did. So never just rely on one piece of data, because you might end up missing a critical part of your success. It's really important to analyze the trends of the buyers in your business. What behaviors are they exhibiting versus people who just aren't really that serious? So when people book a call, similar thing happens. We then get a notification in our Slack channel with all the information about the customer, what they're looking for, so that we can best prepare for that call, because we like to make these calls as valuable as possible to really help people come to the right decision. And I'll come more onto this in a sec in terms of like how we actually approach sales, because this is a really critical element as well. However, one of the big lessons that I learned here is that a lot of the time we were getting leads in, and because we didn't give them any kind of price indication to begin with of how much our services were. And the only reason I did this is because when I looked on other agencies' websites, no other agencies were talking about price. So I thought, oh, I better not talk about price either. But then we got people show up to the call. They often didn't have the budget. They didn't know what the price should be, which is then what led us to recently actually publishing a pricing page on our website. Now, even though all of our packages we offer for clients are completely custom and bespoke based on their needs, one of the biggest things I found is from speaking to customers and prospects over the years is that there is a huge lack of transparency, and it is one of the biggest pet peeves that people hate about marketing agencies. And that lack of transparency creates friction, it creates frustration, and it leads to people having their guards up when they're coming to these sales calls or when they're inquiring. Even if you have complex or custom pricing, you're literally doing yourself no favors by not even giving people a rough ballpark of what your prices start from, or what factors go into pricing, or what a potential range might be. Even if you have to publish articles on your website that explain about how pricing works, what are the factors that go into that, what you will find is that that level of transparency will end up winning you so much business over your competitors, especially if your competitors don't talk about pricing. So by adding this on here, not only did we start seeing an increase in leads, but again, the lead quality was much better. So we were getting less poor fit leads because they could instantly disqualify themselves and say, oh, I can't afford these services. But for the leads who could afford these services, they thought, oh, great, I can actually now plan and I can now budget for this. And this is actually one of the biggest reasons a lot of clients come to us, because of our transparency, and sometimes just I'm very, very brutally honest when I speak to people, and our team are exactly the same. If I don't believe we can help someone, or I don't believe a product or a service is marketable, or there are certain things that are broken, I will tell people how it is, because I don't want to do you a disservice by signing you up for something if I don't think it's going to work. And then finally, another thing to note here is that even if people drop off at this stage, if circumstances change or they have to reschedule, You always want people to come back into this world. And this is where your content, your lead nurture never stops. You know, things like your blog, your YouTube channel, you're posting content on socials, your email nurtures, you always need to be showing up, because this is what is going to be the fuel. Your content is going to be the fuel to keep this engine going. So finally, now let's talk about sales and what happens here. So one of the biggest lessons that I learned when it came to sales is that, as weird as this sounds, sales is not about selling. It is about empowering people to make a decision and help give them the clarity on their problems. One of the best analogies I heard here from a sales training I did a while back was playing the role of a doctor, right? When you think about like what a doctor does, they don't tell people things. They don't say, oh, you know, we've got this amazing new prescription. You should check it out. It's really, really awesome. No, they sit down, they're going through an assessment, they're asking questions, and they only prescribe once they've got the full picture. It's exactly the same thing with sales. And if I don't believe our medicine or the prescription is going to help you, I'm not going to give it to you. I'm going to give you a recommendation, maybe something else I think you can do in the meantime. Showing up with that attitude on sales calls, I believe that a lot of sales, a lot of any of our day-to-day interactions are these energetic exchanges. People can feel this energy when you're trying to push something on them. If you're genuinely trying to help someone, people can feel that energy from you. So starting to really embody this had a huge impact on our overall close rates. This also comes down to disarming people as well, because when people show up to sales calls, naturally, again, they've got their guard up because they feel like they're going to be sold to. So by setting the intention of the call early on, by telling people that, hey, look, we actually turn down about 40 to 50% of customers we speak to, it helped to disarm people. It helped to bring people's guard down, because when they have their guard up, they can't take in information because they have a wall in front of them. So it's so important that you disarm people before they show up to a call. And this is, again, what content does, what having all of these things in place, all of these elements that build trust, it helps to disarm people. Whereas what I found when I was reaching out to people, people would naturally have their guard up because the dynamic shifted. I've reached out to them as opposed to them coming to us as the expert. Again, it comes back down to this. People do not want to be sold to, but they do want to buy. So focus on allowing them to come to a decision themselves, as opposed to them feeling like you are trying to put a decision on them or force them into a decision. So now this comes on to opportunity nurturing and retargeting flows. So naturally, even once we've had that first call with people, there's going to be a lot of consideration that comes in here. So this is where it now comes down to kind of proving that you are an expert on these things. Again, like I mentioned earlier, after analyzing the data from like some of the people who are actually buying from us, sometimes these people are viewing over 100 pages on our website, literally reading all of our blogs, all of our YouTube videos, all of our case studies to really understand, like, are we the right people? And this just highlights the importance of working in all of these elements, because the more elements you have here, the more content you can put out here, the more touch points you can have, the more trust, the more confident somebody is going to feel about them buying from you. If you have very little information, if you're not really publishing content right now, you're not really giving your prospects or potential customers much chance to get to know your brand and to feel confident in that buying decision. So just to add on and to compound with all that front end content that we had, we started publishing video case studies from our clients. We started getting more reviews on trusted social networks like Trustpilot and Google. We started creating detailed step-by-step case studies. This wasn't just your typical case study that you see on most agencies of, hey, we helped this customer achieve X amount of ROAS. We were literally detailing step-by-step exactly the things we did for these businesses. Any of the content we publish, whether this be case studies or otherwise, we want people to be able to learn from it. So even if you're not in the market to buy right now, if you do come back a year later, 2 years later, you think, who's taught me the most? Who's been the most helpful to me? hopefully we are the first people that you think of. And then finally, when people are ready to sign up and we get the verbal agreement from them, we will issue the contract out to them from HubSpot. We will then get a notification when leads have signed up so that our whole team can get prepared and we can begin the onboarding process to ensure a smooth transition into customers. And this really brings me on to the final lesson that I wanted to mention here. Businesses often break and fall apart when they start to obsess over attribution. Because here's the truth, it is getting harder and harder to attribute leads. With new privacy regulations coming out left, right, and center, lots of platforms blocking third-party cookies, it's only going to get harder to attribute leads. There are also going to be a lot of touch points in your marketing that you simply can't attribute. This is sometimes referred to as dark social. So those Reddit posts I showed you earlier, people very often don't click to our website from Reddit. They will do their own research, sometimes Googling my name and then discovering the business. So HubSpot tells us we're getting all these leads from organic, when actually, when we ask people, it turns out they're finding out about us through Reddit. And even then, that person who found us through Reddit might then have to watch several other pieces of content before eventually inquiring through us. So if you're measuring each piece in isolation and obsessing over that first touch or last touch attribution, you're often going to end up unknowingly killing off pieces of your marketing that are actually helping you to generate leads and sales. So for example, we speak to a lot of companies who have seen their ROAS from ads declining. So what they end up doing is turning off the ads, and they then realize their sales drop off a cliff, which they're often surprised about because to them it looked like the ads were just underperforming. But actually it was an attribution issue a lot of the time, not an actual performance issue. So instead, trust your team to set clear initiatives and track overall marketing efficiency over time. So there you have it, guys. I really hope that video's helped and I hope you found that interesting. Whether you're in B2B or B2C, I think you'll find either of these next two videos to be super useful. I'll see you there.